Welcome back to the live stream. This week we've got Daniel Sanderson. Daniel's our in-house philosopher on the Steve and Friends live stream. We're going to focus on him this week. It's going to be fun. Be kind, stay safe, and enjoy the show. Welcome back to the show. It's Steve and Friends, the live stream. We've got Daniel Sanderson as the guest this week. If you're wondering why I picked a panel member for a guest, it's late summer. Who wants to be on the show at this time? I'm surprised we even got 8 viewers in the first few seconds of this show. Hopefully it picks up a little bit. Hello, Michael. Hello, Ghost on the Shelf. And hello, the other Michael, Mike Radzicki, who is back from vacation. It is August 19th, 2023. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the Prof. Steve Keen channel. If you're over on X, formerly known as Twitter, make sure you hit the like button or the repost button, and then come over here, join the chat right here. That's where we're at. I'm going to bring on Mike first because it's been so long. Here is Mike. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Getting ready for the start of the school year. Starting tomorrow, the kids are going to start coming back, and we got the doctoral students ramping up. And I had to go to 3 retreats this week: a department leadership, and a college. So I'm all retreated out this week.
Oh wow, that's a tough life you live, going to retreats. I don't know how I'd handle
Giant
3
Post-it notes.
So I've made some change. While you were gone, I made some changes to the top chatters list. It's now called the top chatters and comments list, and it's a lot longer each week. Let's take down James. Let's go into the list and let's get Mike to read it this week. Here it is. Top chatters and commenters.
Michael D'Souza Cruz, WWE fan, 0104. Phil Waller, the hasty ent. Lane Adele hates the clock. TR, the hasty ent again. Hugh N. Bob Liori, Ghost on the Half Shell. Andrew Baker. Joe Polito, Political Economy 101. Jesus. Greenalness. Frankly, Slug is Urex, Bully Pulpit 2000, Web Freaks, Dregai, N, Alex Plant, Christopher Doby, Derek McDaniel, and JC Resdoc Stud 941 verified. Oh my goodness.
Oh geez, that last one was a good one. I didn't even know if the font I was using would have those characters, if it was just going to be a square. Luckily that worked out. He's verified. Just
okay,
so you know.
Going on there, but okay.
You did a good job there. I noticed you were getting tired halfway through. There was some huffing and puffing going on. But that was a good job. Drag-Eye is in Drag-Eye is in the chat. Hello, Drag-Eye. Hello, James. If I didn't say hello, I'm going to bring on the man himself, Daniel Sanderson.
Thank you.
Daniel, it's your show this week, so I hope you do good. Like we were saying in the pre-show, this is probably the worst spot of the year to be on the show. But nonetheless, hopefully you can survive it. I'm going to start with questions right away. And the main question is I want the story about how you and Steve Keen first hooked up 2 years ago now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, I, I seen Steve in the news, right? And I didn't know a whole lot other than he seemed to be really passionate and connected to the climate change movement. Really, that's the insertion point. I didn't pick him up for economics or any other thing for any other reason. Now, I do read a lot of philosophy, so I've got a real strong interest in economics, but probably from you got to read Marx's perspective or like the history of economics, which Steve has got a talent for as well, right? So he's kind of this well-rounded academic that can talk about, I guess, like the historical development of economics and really kind of like appreciate and love the, it's an interesting battle with Steve because it's like, I think he's a true academic, and it'd be like, well, wow, this philosopher saying true academic, what is that? Like, I'm going into dangerous territory, right? But I think he captures an essence of academia that when you drill down, I think most academics would agree with. They love the discovery of something that adds to our cumulative knowledge, right? Like that's a really, really high ideal and direction of academia. And I think that I recognized right away that Steve has this, he's a living contributor to that framework, I think. So anyways, yeah, I gave him a call. I was like, hey, Steve, do you want... So you listen to all that bullshit that I just spouted, right? And you know what? I just think I'm trying to be truthful, right? But when you tell somebody that, then they're like, man, you can really give out the bullshit, but it's good. I liked hearing it, so let's do a YouTube show together. Right? He's like, yeah, let's do it. And
tell me about the show.
Well, I'll preface it by saying I think, and it's kind of, okay, it's kind of conspiratorial, right? In a way. But it's also, I think there's some pragmatic part to it, but I don't really put a huge amount of emphasis on this thought, okay? And that is that our channel is called COVID and Climate Correlations. And at the time, I thought it was a great idea, and I still think it is, right? Correlating the public perceptions of the climate versus the COVID reaction is very interesting to correlate and have discussions on, right? And they were reoccurring, themes throughout the show. But the issue that I'm warning against is possibly a suppression on the algorithm. I don't know if that was the case, but like anything COVID, like we had COVID in it and it had warnings that would come up, and we never said anything that was controversial, but I think it was kind of downplayed a little bit, just as an observation, not as we need to turn the government around or something silly like that. Just I think it did have some sort of suppression going on.
Yeah. Well, just using the word COVID or climate change on YouTube throws up, the warning signs that get posted on the bottom of the video, right? So no doubt there was probably some sort of impact to it, but that's how I met you, Dan. Before I actually met you was through that show. And it was my favorite show of the week back then. What kind of guests did you have on that show? And I remember there was quite a number of, pretty big guests. Go through them. Some of the big ones.
Oh, I'll tell everybody right away that I'm going to ask for your help on it, Ty, because I'm not the best with remembering names, right?
Let's start with
Jürgen Randers. Yeah. Jürgen Randers. Yeah. Yeah. Jürgen Randers. He was on there. I was oddly nervous, quite nervous to be with Jurgen, and I felt that he behind the scenes on that, I think he was a little bit unimpressed with the lack of formality, right? Like a bigger show might bridge the, I guess, like have an offline conversation with the guest, tell them what to expect, go through a little bit more of a formal introduction and stuff like that, right? Where we turn the show on, we're like, hey man, how's it going? Right? Like I think he was just I don't think he was impressed with that. So it kind of took a little bit to kind of warm him up in the, and then once I'm kind of put in that sort of like, I missed the social, I mean, in theory, I should be able to play both. Like, when the guest is kind of a little bit more expecting the formal sort of experience, to be able to like sense that and then adjust to that. Right. I mean, that I think is the ideal. And so that kind of put me off on the wrong foot on the interview. Right. But yeah, he was great. He was really, really good.
Yeah, he's definitely an intellectual hero of mine for sure. He's right up there with probably, in my eyes, with Jay Forrester and Dennis Meadows and Daniela Meadows. Jeez, can't say the names.
But
I put Mike and Steve up in my intellectual hero list too. Although they're variable because I talk to them, from time to time, and so if they say something
they fall from grace. They're like the yo-yo ones. They're the ones that come up and down, up and down.
they're on a precarious pedestal.
Familiarity breeds contempt. Yeah.
What were you going to say, Daniel? You're going to ask something.
This is where I'm conflicted in my thinking right now with Jurgen Randers and the alternative model that he's put forward. And kind of, I'm going to use the word peddling. Okay. There is a negative connotation to it, but it's just to make it abrupt and say, then move on. And it has nothing to do whether it's good or bad. Okay. But what I'm saying is that there is a form of rhetoric going on with what he's presenting. And I want to really understand what your guys' thoughts are on the variation of the model itself. If you're
so are you referring to the differences between let me take that down, the World 3 model and the Earth for All model?
Yes.
Yeah, so I've studied the World 3 model through and through, right? And that was from an extension of originally studying urban dynamics and world dynamics, which was the World 2 model was world dynamics. And I've looked at both. I have versions in Stella and VinSim of Earth for All. I have some issues with some of these epicycles that they put in, these 10-year and 20-year cycles just to give waves. I don't know about that. I have to look at the equations more. So I have some issues around that. And I always knew that Jorgen was very much against including nominal GDP in the original World 3 model. He wanted to keep it a real, because his saying, and I've heard him say this many times, you can create as many dollars as you want and change the size of the world dynamic curves, but it offers no additional information. He seems to have adjusted that and has added some monetary aspects. I think there's government spending, so aggregate government spending. It's a big model, the Earth for All. I think it sits around 800 variables. So no matter what software you're using, Minsky, Stella, VinSim, MATLAB, or Simulink, it's very hard to pick apart. Essentially, with models that large, I just start looking at the individual equations and trying to look at one part. As a system dynamicist, it's fascinating just because it's such a large model. Like, how fucking cool is that you've got 800 variables and your model doesn't crash? Like, from that perspective, that's really cool. But I think it's gotten too large and too complex to completely understand, and I actually have that critique between the World 2 model and the World 3 model. Like, so when I'm on Twitter or social media, I'll refer to the World 2 model because it's more simplistic, so I can really show those top level effects. There's some things lacking in the World 2 model that the World 3 model has, but for illustration purposes, smaller is probably better. Um, as for Jorgen pumping it up, well, I think they went through the experience of limits to growth. It's immediate like impact, and then the world didn't do anything. So I imagine the way he's trying to push it now is an adjustment of how they originally pushed it with limits to growth. I'm sure he's trying to advertise it in a way that has longer longevity and more impact. And another thing I've
Mm,
noticed with Earth for All is it is far less dystopian.
mm,
Okay, there is a message of hope that we can um, maybe reach equilibrium or sustainability. Now, Dennis Meadows, on the other hand, says we've long passed sustainability and we're already past, we're in the overshoot and we have to come back down. And I haven't heard any Dennis Meadow comments about the Earth for All model. I don't think he was involved in it. That would be interesting to hear from him what he thinks. Now, Dennis Meadow for the viewers is one of the original authors for the limits to growth model. It's Jorgen Randers. Mike, you would probably know better. I think um, Dennis was Jorgen's supervisor, maybe. Maybe I don't know. What do you think, Mike? What's your thoughts on it?
I'd have to look at Jorgen's dissertation again. I think Jay Forrester supervised it, but Dennis asked Jorgen to join the team
Okay.
for the limits to growth follow up study from Jay's World Dynamics book. Last conversation I had with Jorgen about all this was on the order of, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And Jorgen had presented his model, the version of it at that time. And he said to me, Mike, you're an economist. What do you think? And I said, looks good, except I think you got money a little weird. So we sat down. He said, well, you got 15 minutes to talk to me about it. And the 15 minutes ended like being 3 hours. We
mhm.
sat at a table in the hotel lobby. This was at a conference. I think Jorgens expressed to me at the time, this is my recollection anyway, that there were kind of two main things he
Mike,
was.
I gotta interrupt. I gotta interrupt. I have a burning question, right? Because
Yeah.
pretend I'm the biographer, and I want to know about that moment when when he asked you that, and he said 15 minutes. Was there any indication that he knew it wasn't? What was he kind of joking?
Hold on, Daniel. I have to interrupt you. We have a very, very well articulated bot on the channel. Should I say thank you to a bot? Sure. Thank you, Demand Better Entertainment. I thank you for loving our channel. Carry on, Daniel Sanderson.
No, you got the. Did you get the question, Mike?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think it was more like you got a minute or a couple of minutes or 15 minutes, something like that, and just a chit chat, and then we got into it.
Oh,
And
I see. Okay.
suddenly we look up and the clock has time has passed.
Okay.
But my recollection, again, I don't want to speak for Jorgen, but my recollection is he had two sort of big themes he was working on. One is how do you address the global challenges, limits to growth like challenge, whether it's climate change or what have you, without destroying economies, which is the big conundrum, right? And so that he was working with an economist to build a system dynamics model, which you articulated, that can look at that. That's why I thought he had money a little weird. And the other thing, I think one of his big themes is that national governance probably is not going to get this done on a global scale. You almost need an international governing body, whether it's the UN or something new, in order to address these grand challenge issues for the planet. And again, how do you get people to agree to do that, right? So it's tricky business. There's no obvious answer.
So Daniel, we'll keep moving up. We'll keep on the show because I think that's important that we cover that part of Daniel Sanderson here as COVID and climate connection because of the connectivity to Steve Keen. What about Vox Day? How did you get Vox Day on the show?
Oh, yeah, Vox, he was a real special guest, and you have your analytics of like kind of stable views, and then all of a sudden Vox's just went boop, like went really high. He has quite a following. He's from I don't know if alt-right, but right, yeah, nationalistic kind of tendency. So
Hold on, Daniel. I got to interrupt you again. Demand better entertainment. Are you really like a real person here? I'll bring this up. This seems far more articulated than a bot. This seems like an easy person. Um, demand better entertainment. Can you put in the chat? Can you type 5 to 0 backwards for me? That should be a good bot test. Carry on.
That's so funny. Right? It's like Ty's trying to break the Turing machine here, right? Like, I don't know. What were we talking about? I lost my train of thought with that.
Vox Day.
Vox Day, yeah. So anyways, he's from the right, and so Steve and him are opposite politically, but they have a lot of respect for each other. Vox actually is going to be publishing his next, or like a reprint of yeah, real. Yeah.
He must be real.
Yeah, he's real. Right on, man. Okay. All right.
I'll just say it, demand better entertainment. Thanks for joining us, man. We always like new viewers, and this is the weak part of the summer. So anybody new is more than welcome. Sorry I called you a bot.
It kind of
carry on, Dan.
Kind of helps with the tagline of the show. Like we demand better entertainment, right? Ta-da! You can just swing in and
here we are.
Here we are, right? Kind of brilliant, right? He allures you with the temptation that you're maybe AI, but you're not, right?
Mm-hmm. I like it. I like it a lot. Keep talking about Vox Day.
Yeah, Vox Day. That was kind of like the point where we just said he's the greatest living economist for the reasons that point that out. And I've publicly made that. I guess I don't know all of the economists, but I hope Mike would feel like not necessarily in agreement, but understand how I could get there, right? And I don't know, like, how is Steve viewed amongst other economists? Like, I think
it depends.
His work
depends what circle.
Yeah, exactly. But then, yeah, what do you think, Mike? Like, is there any possibility to that unfolding that he was real pivotal in history?
Hard to, it depends on what we mean by pivotal. Economists divide themselves into schools of thought, right? And so if you're not in a particular school of thought, somebody from a differing school of thought is not going to like you or your work. Period. End of discussion. And if the other school of thought controls the Richard T. Ely lecture, the Nobel Prize in economics, and what have you, all of the top journals, entrance into the top journals, you're going to be shut out and never, seen as a pivotal character in the economics profession. So, how does one combat that? Maybe avoiding the economics profession and going to the general public and the business community and get recognized there. So I guess it's like, who's deciding you're a pivotal economist and what have you. But, the schools of thought that control the major awards, the major lectures, the major journals in economics don't really value system dynamics, at least their understanding of what it is. And so as a consequence, we're kind of, seen as being on the fringes or what have you of the profession. I mean, myself and Steve, and then Ty, and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, the consilient person in me is going to say, show more tangible algorithms in your research and and your descriptions, turn your descriptions into algorithms that, basically predict the future. And now you've got, faster instant adoption because there's no argument in it. And that ends up being something like a discovery, right? But what I'm hearing is that there's just a description of the real world for economics that is more reliable and more fine detailed, or it better describes the way reality is. And so we should be using that to model the way our economic systems are, right? But there's no, we're nowhere close to turning economics into a science, right? We can use scientific tools, but we can't really do kind of predictive stuff. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Jay Forrester always said that system dynamics, economics, they should be disciplines that are not disciplines, they should be professions like law and medicine. Certainly doctors, physicians use scientific stuff, but they're not like physicists. They're not like chemists, right? They do case studies. They look for patterns. They use inductive logic a lot of times to diagnose what's the problem and how might we go about solving the problem. They're not starting from laws of the universe and then making predictions about solar eclipses or what have you. So it's a very different way of doing science or doing whatever we do, practicing our profession. And so in the economics profession, heterodox economists tend to look at the real world first and then try and find patterns and generalize from there. They take sort of an inductive approach, right? And the orthodox economists who control the profession, who see economics as a science like physics, and in fact, some of the most famous Nobel Prize winning economists from back in the day were trained in physics. They had their PhDs in physics. So it shouldn't be surprising that they took sort of a physicist approach where you start with a theory of how not the solar system works, theory of how the economy works, and then derive testable hypotheses and then go collect measurements, numbers, and run some statistical tests, right? So if you're not doing that, if you're starting by doing a case study of the real world and find out what's going on, your work is seen as invalid. You're not following the scientific method as defined by the people who control the profession. Okay?
Yeah.
You know what? I just have to say that Mike really filled in for Steve there, just in a far more diplomatic way, without you know how Steve does. Mike just said the exact same thing Steve does, but like Mike did it in such a way that he'd probably get elected mayor of Boston at this point. So, well said.
Yeah, we would be lucky. You know what, Mike? We'd be lucky if we got through that without an F-bomb, basically.
Yeah.
No, I know. I've known Steve a long time, and including we've drank in saloons a lot over the years, and so I know him when when his guard is down.
How is he out in public? Like, how is he out in public? What kind of guy is he out in that pub?
Pretty much the same as he is in public.
Yeah. Oh shit! And you saw him recently.
Says what he means and means what he says.
Yeah. And you saw him at Oxford, I guess, right? Recently, in Boston.
Recently, he came to Boston. Yeah, he was doing something at Harvard, and I picked him up at the airport. And we
Oxford,
had some dinner.
Oxford. Sorry, wrong continent there.
We got a question here. I'll answer this one from our buddy Bob. So, Dynamo Bob was one of the original software programs you could run a system dynamic model in, and it was all text-based. So it had its own code. You type out a line of text. So if you wanted an ordinary differential equation, it would be K bracket dt over. Basically, there was a line of code, and then that would spit out old days on pieces of paper, little line graphs which would be text letters to create the plot on the piece of paper. You can download a mod of it, or I think they might call it a ROM. So you could sit and do a model in Dynamo if you wanted to, but that's very hard. The new interfaces, you're just wiring stuff together. So Dynamo was an original um, way of doing system dynamics. Yes, you can find a downloaded version. You've got to kind of willy nilly it to get it to run on your PC. You're just better off, getting a free copy of Vincim or Minsky or maybe Stella or whatnot. So that's to answer your question, Bob. Daniel, carry on one more thread to the COVID and climate correlations with post Keynesian economist Stephen King. We'll go on to one more guest that you had. You guys eventually went live. You guys did a segment on the pandemic, and a certain modeler came on with quite an extensive pandemic model. Who was that? What was that all about? How did that come about?
Oh man, there was this young Ramajan that he's referred to in these legendary circles of head swelling blackness, right? Like this light, this like glowing light with a black background. I want you to imagine this like beacon of hope for intellectual future, right? This is what was the birthing process of something pure and, like I said, a Ramajan, right? This is what happened. And basically, the guest he was a legend, really. We talk about these fat, yeah. We talk about what is at the other end of the golden rainbow, and that's these fat tails of the distribution. And way out there lies in this like Keynesian universe. There's this like this like unique gem, and so Steve came up with a word to describe that thing. When you pull something out of that long tail, like you're going and you somehow there's a nibble, or you pull it out, and all of a sudden what emerges is fuck a duck. If a duck doesn't emerge out of that fuckery, it's actually, in this case, it was, who it was Tyrone Keynes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was an interesting experience for me. And I really need to actually, write that model out and publish it, how it works and stuff, because to this day, that's still one of my more extensive models. That was both could be used as a flight simulator, so you'd set your exogenous variables, or just run endogenously. Yeah, I should really do something. It's kind of just, fallen on the back burner, but yeah. So go ahead.
I was going to say, so this is an excellent example of the practical application of your model, right? Okay, so to pick up on what Mike was saying, I would say, so you've got the model, and you've got how many variables of inputs coming into your, or how many stocks are coming into the.
Well, it was a 27 state system model. I think it had, going into those stocks, like 40 different flows, and then countless auxiliaries and countless parameters running it.
Right.
A lot of it too, as in system dynamics, when you get that complex, a lot of your model structure is just its legs it stands on, right? So it can look, and if you just give a visual representation of your model to somebody, it can look quite impressive, but really the meat and bones is your stocks, right? Without your stocks, you don't have dynamics, right? It all starts from stocks, in my opinion.
I get this. So I'm gonna bring this from a very organic approach and bring this to Mike. And I'm the sales rep going to go and pitch this, okay, to somebody, to a municipality to use this, okay? So I'm saying, Mike, you made the model. How do I sell the model? I mean, the thing is I'm going to have, and actually both you and Ty can answer, but you've got this model. It's giving us more real-time feedback and being able to identify and quantify things that we didn't previously do that. Okay. Now, the idea that there's a problem, okay, there's the problem that they know of, which we're not offering a solution to, but we're offering a solution to a problem that they're not yet aware of. Would you agree with that?
So I'm not entirely following. So you're saying we have a model, we've created a model of something, an urban.
No, we're going to use Ty's. Yeah, we're going to use Ty's model of the code.
I don't think Mike is really familiar that I made a pandemic model or that whole story.
So we have
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Ty.
Oh, no, I was just saying that you might not be familiar with how Steve and I met. So that may be causing some confusion for you. I don't know. I've myself, I'm going to be quite honest here. I got lost in Daniel's hypothetical there. It's the picture of Greece or Rome or whatever's in the background is extremely distracting. Yeah.
So
that's why I go for this black background. Like there's no confusion. It's just 100% me.
Yeah.
So kind of the way I would, and I don't know if this is answering your question, Dan, but I'll give it a whack here. If you come in with an existing model, in system dynamics anyway, we try to model problems from a systems perspective. We don't try and model the system, because then everything, including the kitchen sink, is in your model, and it's a crazy mousetrap thing. So if the new organization, the new city, the new corporation, whatever, if they don't have the exact same problem as the pre-existing model, then it's really, you're trying to, jam a square peg into a round hole, as opposed to saying, what is your problem or challenge or something you don't understand? And we have a tool set here we can use to first mimic the problem, outline the important structure of the system that is causing this problem, and then talk about redesigning the airplane, redesigning the structure of your city, your corporation, your whatever, so that it behaves better. And so that's kind of two different ways of approaching now the first way is cheaper, right? I have this existing model. I might put it in the cloud and I invite for a fee. You can subscribe to it and use it, but it's been designed to do a certain thing or handful of things. And if your problem is not that thing or handful of things, it's not really appropriate. Whereas if you come in and say, look, tell me what your problem is, and we can build a unique model for you that you can use to address this problem or problem set. That's how we're supposed to do system dynamics anyway.
Yeah.
And I agree with everything Mike just said there. So there's nothing more I can add on. But what I can add on is if you're over on X, formerly known as Twitter, hit the like button, repost there, come over here, join the chat. We're doing okay on Twitter, or X and YouTube this week. I thought we'd have maybe like 1 or 2 people, and I'd feel really bad for Daniel. But you know what? It's turning out okay. If you're already here on the Prof. Steve Keen channel, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, I know Dan's put this on his LinkedIn account. I don't know what you do there. Hit a like button or something over there too, and repost or reshare or whatever they call it. Do that too. Really, really appreciate it. Daniel, I'm going to swing it to what is planksip.org. What is that all about? Tell me.
Yeah, that's my my creation, starting with a registered trademark. Planksip is a registered Canadian trademark to help academics spread their ideas on the internet, right? So that moved into a media outlet, and just like the front page says, it says this is a philosophy and culture media outlet, and that's what it is. So when I talk to people about what it can be, maybe it's a very platonic, ideal way of looking at things, but I think it provides a clairvoyant vision nonetheless. I try and reimagine the way journalism can be. And I mean cultural journalism. So that means tapping into an individual source of knowledge. And I do that not from a mystical standpoint. I actually do that from the words at Delphi, know thyself. This is not something. This is something that Socrates and Plato referred to in many places throughout, predominantly the Republic, which is absolutely essential to the Western way of thinking. Knowledge actually comes in a form of remembrance. Now, this is maybe one of the contentious issues that people don't really relate to when they think of Plato. But I interpret this from Plato as meaning something like, what does it feel like to learn something? Like, how would you describe what that means in the lecture hall when all of a sudden the action potentials bust through that threshold and the aha moment comes through? The teacher's no longer just drolling on. It's like something snaps and you're like, you made that connection, you made that experience, that moment of learning. And effectively, I think what Plato was trying to describe, remember, they're just describing things. If they got the description wrong, did they get the essence of it right? And I think they did. I think he did. I can see how it would feel like remembering something. Without the, oh, this is the first time excitement. It's like, oh yeah, that I know that to be true. How do you know that to be true? Right? And this ignited something in humanity, this ability to turn inward and look at ourselves with the innate knowledge of knowledge itself. This is the essence of a Greek ontology, even, is that. Okay. Anyway, so all of this is weaved into the direction and where I think people ought to spend their time learning, researching anything from quantum physics to philosophy. I think if you want to develop I should stay away from true in this reference here, but if you want to cultivate culture, one of the best ways to do that is to return to the classics and study what makes academia so great. So anyways, that's basically planksip's a celebration of that work.
Very, very nice. Brown Warrior, welcome to the chat. I suggest you just get a better internet connection. It won't be so glitchy on your end. I'm just looking at the feed separately right now. It looks pretty good to me. So, but thanks for the input, and hopefully you get that worked out.
I like what Michael says here. Michael D'Souza Cruz, you know, if it to be true when you see it, knowing is seeing. And I think Michael's absolutely right. I mean, and so the thing is from a philosopher's standpoint, I want to come and say that you're right. And then also this alternative way of understanding things is right. You say, well, how can they both be true? Well, they can be true because you can look at, what's happening there. Do you understand? So what's the higher form of knowledge there? It's understanding those types of things, right? And so you say, well, what is Daniel talking about? This understanding and this alternative sort of knowing. Well, the alternative form of knowing is how we can abstract things, right? We know that, you can't touch mathematical concepts, right? There's a part of what's essential to be human is the fact that we can abstract. And so all Plato's doing, or if I get into something that feels too metaphysical, all I'm doing is sketching out basically like how the experience is thinking. That's all I'm doing. And it's just a way that you can say, oh yeah, I know what you're thinking, right? So it's a relatability. It's a way that you can understand. It's not intended to be a refutation, if that makes sense.
Interesting. I often wonder, what our truths are, and is truth more of a common framework that we all agree on that has nothing to do with physical reality? So when Michael said knowing is seeing, if we're all seeing in a common way, That's the truth. We all see it the same way, but it isn't the same way in physical reality. And I know this is you want philosophy from Ty. Here it comes, right? Is a common truth reality, or is it just a set of assumptions that the majority of people in a population agree upon? So it's then defined as the truth.
Well, Mike brings up optical illusions, right? I mean, and he's right. And then now you have the knowledge that your mind's playing tricks on you a little bit, right? I get that. I mean, this is largely the work of Daniel Dennett showing that. Say, look, you can't really trust the senses. Well, there's a long tradition in philosophy of not being able to trust the senses. I mean, effectively, but it doesn't exist as a refutation to Plato, or it just depends. Like, what you almost have to understand what the psychology of the person you're talking to is. Is the person you're talking to a hard materialist? Well, then, okay, keep all the metaphysics out of it, right? Okay, it's but then there's also the ability to have the conversations where you can actually use the poetry of language to try and basically, like Shelley said, the poets are the true legislators of society.
Who's Shelley?
A famous poet, romantic poet.
Okay.
Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Yeah.
So if I can jump in, so let me tell you a little bit about how we are supposed to do anyway, system dynamics modeling, at least how Forrester taught us. And he would argue that it's really not a question of whether you're going to do modeling or not, because every day we do modeling. Inside of our heads, we don't have a real, family, club, university, business, economy, state, whatever. We have mental representations or mental models, right, of these systems. And we're going to use those to make our decisions anyway. So we do modeling, whether we know it or not. The question is, are our unaided mental models, mental representations, adequate, or are they lacking in some areas? And Forrester would say, mental data our mental models are actually the most abundant and the most valuable source of information. Written information, there's a lot less of it relative to our minds, and that's important. And when people say data, they think numbers, and that's the least abundant of all data that's out there, but it's not irrelevant when it's available. And so we use all of that kind of information to build a system dynamics model, numerical data, written data, and mental data. But mental data is by far the most abundant, and Jay argued the most valuable. So he said what we do in system dynamics modeling is quite modest, really. What we're doing is take our mental model or our shared mental model. We're doing a group model building session with a modest number of experts and stakeholders, the C-suite folks or whatever, in a conference room. And we're going to take what they know, aided by written and numerical information, and make it formal, make it a system dynamics model. And then, that's all without the computer. I mean, we map it out on the computer, but up to that point in time, you haven't needed any technology really. But where humans are bad is at thinking through the dynamics, the change over time of their own mental models, or even worse, a shared mental model. That's where the computer comes in, because it can mercilessly trace through the dynamics, the implications of your own mental model or your own shared mental model with your colleagues. And then you can change but one thing and resimulate and compare. And again, the human mind just can't do that accurately. Yeah. Right. And so Jay said, that's all we're really trying to do with system dynamics. So when people said to him with world dynamics, for example, which was discussed earlier, that you're making these predictions of the future. And, he said, I was asked by the Club of Rome to make a formal model of the world problematique, or the predicament of mankind that they described to me. That's what I did. And the machine is mercilessly tracing out the implications of that. And then we start changing one thing and see how does it matter? Does it change things or what have you? And it's still very interesting, but that's a much more, it's not claiming it's truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we can make point predictions that are very accurate to, one standard deviation, whatever, out into the future. Not even trying to do that. It's really quite a modest thing that we're doing. And it's hoping when you do that to stimulate conversation, that the models become part of the debate over what we might be doing. And they have the advantage of, of mercilessly tracing through your own mental models. Finally, I'll say this, or a couple things. If you can precisely describe it, we can model it. It's when there's a lot of hand waving, and it's like you think you know what you're talking about, but you can't precisely tell me what you mean by that. You got to go back to the drawing board and come back, and we'll model that when you can precisely, tell me what you're talking about. So again, that's kind of, it kind of forces you to think through what do you actually mean. So it disciplines the mind, right? Yeah. And it helps you to be more accurate. Like, what do I know and what do I actually don't know, but think I knew. And very often, by the way, when you simulate these models, because they have all these feedback loops, particularly negative loops, the results are counterintuitive. They're not what you would expect. They're not the simplistic press here, it goes up, press the other way here, it goes down, which is very sort of linear, simplistic thinking that which most human beings do by the very nature of we live in these complex worlds. The machine reveals that often the implications of your own mental model are counterintuitive or different from what you would expect. Final point. I said the final point before, but final point. When you're working with a group of experts and stakeholders, they often disagree with one another. And when you use the modeling to say, all right, let's find the places where we all agree. The widget goes here, then it goes here, then it goes to the customer, right? Who disagrees with that? Nobody. Good. We price it this way. This causes us to raise price. This causes us to lower price, right? Who disagrees? Nobody. We move on. You find that, 85, 90% of a model, everybody agrees. It's the last 10% where they disagree. Good. Now we're making progress. So either we need to do research there and get everybody on the same page with that last 10% or whatever it is. That's one way. And if that's just not possible, sometimes you just don't agree. You run the model both ways, right? You say, let's run it Sally's way, and then let's run it again Johnny's way. And let's see if it matters. Often, guess what? It doesn't matter. It's not a leverage point in the system. Why are we bickering about this?
Yeah.
So it's kind of actually hard to see here. So I was looking using the urban dynamic model to simulate a job guarantee, which it has parameters in it to do that. And it really wasn't an exercise to demonstrate if the job guarantee was bad or not. It was an exercise in system dynamics. Will often, like Mike said, highlight things that are not intuitive. And one of the things that immediately stood out that the average person wouldn't show is it showed a crowding of lower income people. Now, the assumptions of the model could be incorrect, and you can make adjustments afterwards. But that's really what Mike was saying. It wasn't about being like quantitatively dollar for dollar on the nose. It's to start a discussion, run the model, see what the effects are. And here's one example. You can't really see it. It's too bad. But basically, there's a red line that almost it's a logistic there. That's crowding. So what the model is saying is if and this is just a specific example, is if a job guarantee wasn't applied equally, county to county or city to city, and the pay level wasn't at a relevant level to boost people out of poverty, the county or city that's running the program most efficiently is going to attract people from other counties or cities that aren't running the program as efficiently. And you could have a crowding issue. Crowding of lower income people could, and I emphasize the word could, create higher crime. It could create other social unrest in different parts of the community. So that's really like something that I wanted to, and I'll stop sharing this and we'll all reappear. I'll put the That's really a big thing for me in system dynamics is it is a discussion starter. If you can map out your mental model and then run the model and see what the emergent properties are that you wouldn't conceptualize with your own brain. There's two in that model there, I think it's around 400 variables. You're not going to put that in your brain, make a parameter adjustment and see, oh, crowding happens in lower income people. And we can put aside the assumptions of the model if we discover an emergent property that we're like, well, wait a minute, that's kind of a bizarre emergent property. We look at it a little more and we could actually realize, okay, we made an assumption that's wrong, or we can conclude, okay, this is a real issue that we could potentially face with a job guarantee. And what happened to Mike there? He disappeared. Let's bring him back on. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, so and that's not to pick apart the job guarantee. I know it had nothing to do with that. Even in my post, it was a demonstration of system dynamics as a tool, right? And really, Mike put it best. It starts a discussion so we can look at a problem more in depth.
Yeah.
Daniel, how you feeling? It's still your show. Sorry, Mike started with system dynamics, and then I got into it, and we kind of got off the topic of philosophy. And actually, where I want to steer it next is being like coming from a philosophy perspective. How do you look at economics? And I know, like for instance, from the Steve Keen brand and even from the Mike Radzicki brand or the Ty Keaton's brand, it's very mathematical. There we use engineering tools, system dynamics. How do you interpret all of that information from a philosophical perspective, considering the title of this episode is philosophical economics?
Yeah, I mean, I think philosophy can just really help you first think about first principles, and it should be something that everybody has a love for. Quite honestly, it helps you live the good life in that Western tradition. Um, the interest in economics, um, I think it's here I take the lead from Plato. It's too tempting not to try and figure out the best sort of governmental, government to look at, right, or to model ourselves after. And in that tradition, the Greeks, in their infinite wisdom, decided to say, imagine the state like the embodiment of the noble man, right? Okay, now insertion point, it's not a misogynistic, actually it is a misogynistic statement. Like, if you really want to draw it out and think about it, there's some elements to that, right? So it's better just to bring them out and kind of identify what is that, like, male centric kind of piece to the knowledge, and then say, wait a minute, now there is the overlap. Okay, let's not throw out the Greeks because of this silly, no, sorry, I don't want to dismiss that. Let's not throw the Greeks out because there is an element of a male advantage. Okay, let's not do that. But basically, when you're trying to describe the way a society should be run, first of all, let's put it in the context of what was happening in ancient Greece in that time. The war had been lost. Like when Plato's writing his stuff, they had lost the war. They were the losing side, right? I mean, you'd say, well, it's not the victors determining the way things should be, which is interesting. It's like, shit, we lost. We're really thinking hard, right? It's kind of like an atonement almost. Like, it's like a reconciliation even within yourself to say, we thought we had, the best civilization, and oh man, I guess we were wrong, because we're being dismantled. Yeah, okay, Ty.
We're going to go into the second half of the show. WWE fan, thank you for tuning in. I was missing you there. You're a regular. You're a huge contributor to the comments, so I'm really glad you showed up. We're going to go into the second half. We'll be right back, guys and ladies. And we did it again. Now, as I said, our last show was canceled after you appeared on it. So fingers crossed the executives don't do that again.
The more I read in the neoclassical thing, the more I just, I'm scratching my eyeballs out all the time.
The voice of God in the background.
Oh, geez. Once the coins get warm enough because of your body temperature in the winter, it actually keeps you moderate beer drinking in the evenings. Well, that's inspiring for a Saturday morning. Still friends after the show. We made it through a whole hour and I didn't turn off the stream because we actually had viewers, which I'm kind of shocked for late August. And Daniel's not an economist, so he's still drawing in a crowd. That's pretty good. We'll bring Daniel and Mike on. Daniel, okay. It's going to be your turn next to read the list. Are you prepared?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Daniel Sanderson reading top chatters and commenters from 2 weeks ago.
Michael D'Souza Cruz, WWE Fan 0104, Phil Waller, The Hasty Ant, Lana Dell, Hates the Clock, TR, The Hasty Ant, Hugh N, Bob Leori, Ghost on the Half Shell, Andrew Baker, Joe Polito, Political Economy 101, Jesus or Jesus, Green Illness, Frankly, Sluggy Rex, Bully Pulpit 2000, Web Freaks, Drageye, and Alex Plant, Christopher Dobby, Derek McDaniel, and JC Rez Doc, Stoot 94, Verified, Square Rectangleness. Square. It's a rectangle. It's a rectangle.
Oh, that's great. You did a good job, Daniel.
You
did a really good job. Yeah. So we've got some guests lined up for September, and we're going to kind of expand our thinking on this show. So we've kept it very post-Keynesian in a lot of ways, and ecological economics, and we're gonna kind of get have some counter. What are you gonna say?
I have something burning because it ties back into what somebody asked about Steve and Marxism, and then I can make and pull the point into, I guess, one of the things that I'm thinking about with economics, if I can.
The question about does Steve believe in Marxism? I remember that question. That was quite a long time ago. Let's see if I can find it.
It's starred. It's a star one, I think.
It's starred. Okay. Let's take a look. From Snert Rich. No, Reich. Snert Rich. Oh no. What do you want to talk? What do you want to say to that?
I want to involve Mike here. Okay. So, and it'll be just short sort of things. This is how I'm processing it, knowing Steve's a friend and Mike is a friend of Mike's and Ty's too. So, okay. So Mike, I think breaking that question down, first of all, it's worth acknowledging that Marxism is just a general, too general of a term, right? And from we need a little bit more precision to be able to say what Steve's thoughts are about Marxism as a whole. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think he's written about, he doesn't like the labor theory of value. He thinks it has some flaws.
Yeah.
But I also think, I don't want to put words in his mouth, I think he would agree that Marx, as an economist, as an original thinker about economics, was a very important figure in the history of economic thought, sort of the first evolutionary economist, right? So, even though there might be some issues with some of the details of his theory.
Well, it's interesting to use you use the word evolutionary in there. I thought that that's a little bit of a stretch for me. I think that he was the first to try and scientifically describe the study of society. Sociology. Yeah, I get that. I don't really. I mean, I don't even. I don't think he really, thought about it in terms of an evolutionary standpoint so much.
Well, I think the idea is that economic systems evolve from slavery, feudalism, capitalism, socialism, eventually to pure communism, and you could jump or accelerate the process by having a revolution if the reserve army of the unemployed would rise up and stop. Religion is the opiate of the masses. They're just allowing this to happen, and the capitalists can't help themselves because they're forced to compete and replace people with machines, so on and so forth. So he described this whole thing as to how the system would evolve. He was anti-Hegelian, this antithesis and all that evolutionary kind of. So he was the first really to think about, I believe, the economy, the socioeconomic system as this evolving entity moving forward. And then you had people like Veblen and Schumpeter, and then modern evolutionary economists who have, taken the ball from there. But, then some of the details of his theory were, questionable. On the other hand, the guy made a good beginning, and then you can say, well, look at all the terrible things that have happened with, communist dictators and all that. And then you say, well, is that really Karl Marx's fault, or people who did these nasty things on behalf or blaming it, or on and on it goes. But anyway, I would think that Steve, generally thinks Marx is a monumental figure in economics, but he has problems with, I believe he's written the labor theory of value.
Yeah. And he also, I'd agree with that. And he also, I think he wrote a paper on technology and the value of technology. I think that was, an important missing component of that's not included in Marx, right? I mean, if you're trying to do a system and include all of, there is a labor theory of value, but it's not the only value in the system, right? And I think that's what he debunked, to use one of the words from one of his books.
Yeah. Right? By the way, modern institutional economists who also consider themselves to be evolutionary economists, not to be confused with the neo-Schumpeterians, who also consider themselves to be evolutionary economists and what have you. So it gets you get terminology overload here, but the institutional economists will talk in a similar vein to Marx about how socioeconomic systems evolve. And they talk about the ceremonial approach to doing things and the new technological way of doing things, and the conflict between the old way and the new way of doing things. And then from that, you get a societal change of some sort, change in the structure of the system. And you can think bricks and mortar stores versus Amazon, for example, or whatever.
So we've got a Political Economy 101. Thanks for joining the chat. He posted something on Twitter that I found very funny. Why is this Sanderson guy so aggressive? It's intimidating. I promised that I would, ask it if he didn't ask directly on the show. Daniel, why are you so aggressive? And I do often find it intimidating as well. Please.
I didn't know that I was aggressive. I guess I should tone down the hand waving a little bit.
Yes. I often, like Political Economy 101, I tried to get it from the source for you. I make sure I keep all of our viewers happy and ask all the hard-hitting questions. And so far, we just don't know, because Daniel doesn't know. So I hope that helped. Probably didn't, but I asked the question. I was going to say, because it's the after show, just to give everybody a little bit of an idea of what's coming up. We're going to kind of get some outside thinkers on the show just because we want to branch out a little bit further. We want the discussion not to be confrontational, but we want those, academic debates to occur on the show from time to time, but still have a friendly outcome. So be prepared, people. Be prepared to be kind to some of these people that may not share your views. Make them feel welcomed. And it should be entertaining at the end of the day. Who knows? You might see a leading Austrian on the show anytime soon. And we all know what Steve thinks about Austrian economics. So just be prepared. It's coming. You might even see a neoclassical on the show pretty quick too. So that's what's coming up for the show. I think next week we have a guest lined up who's been on the show already, but was Clint Bollinger. So he might be coming back depending on, his schedule. If he doesn't come back, maybe next week I'll do a feature on myself. Just vanity.
Oh,
looking in
I
the
see
mirror
what
type
I
shit.
see what it was. I see what it was. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a good show.
Of course it's good. Well, I might push it one more week. So
September
maybe
long
I'll give
weekend.
it, maybe, okay, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I might be booked already. I don't know. I'm gonna pick like the prime time of the year to do my guest feature. Maybe I'll give Mike the guest feature next week if our other guest is unavailable as he's traveling to Australia. That might make it a
Hey,
little bit
Michael
difficult.
wants to know about fascists. I want to talk about fascists for a minute.
Talk about it.
We'll put up Michael's comment there.
Michael's made okay, here. You're going to have
not.
fast.
No, you're not.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Fascist
So
waiting.
you're not going to have fascists or fascists in waiting on the show, Ty, are you?
Yeah. Well,
Then now hold on. Let's define what a fascist is first. So Dan, what is a fascist?
this is where a small group of controlling individuals monopolize the wealth of a country, basically, and dictate like a fascist state, right? Would dictate what everybody's supposed to do, and objections are usually met with severe consequences. Really.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that could probably apply to even just small groups that aren't in political power, but have a cult-like effect to a segment of the population. And they're very, they will exclude you if you don't meet their views. Is that kind of a fascist framework?
Yeah, but the complex thinker in me, the student in this, would say there's a lot of things that go into that bathtub. So you can always kind of like realign yourself and find your niche within society, because there's enough of other influences for you to participate in, right? Like if you don't like that institution, you can go to that institution, right? And there's enough plurality of choice within society that you don't have to go and associate with the one group over another, with that one particular group, right? You're not forced into conformity.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was just saying, my understanding, at least from sort of an economics point of view, of fascism, if we're going to define it, is that it's akin to socialism. It's a collectivist point of view, except under socialism, the government, the state, would own the means of production. And in a fascist state, private citizenry still owns the means of production, but is in cahoots with the state. So the politicians and the head of industry get together and decide what to do. And then there's also, on the political side, an element of nationalism associated with fascism. So you have this this nationalistic viewpoint or tendency of the populace, and then the government and the industry leaders go in some room somewhere and decide what's going to happen. The state doesn't overtly own the means of production, but influences directly how it, what's going to happen in the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Michael D'Souza Cruz, I don't think Austrians or libertarians quite fit into that category, but MMTers might.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's trying to start a fight. He
Right.
likes that. I likes this. Give him a low shot. Just
Listen, so
boom.
here's the thing is as I'm getting older and older, and I'm still kind of fresh skinned and stuff, but now you know that I'm kicking
Fresh
40s
skinned.
40s door down. I'm becoming more accepting to all views and I'm willing to listen to it. In fact, often find myself questioning the views that I've believed in for a long while. And that's hard, even in my personal relationships, right? I'm starting to adjust and see that I don't want to get stuck in echo chambers. I don't want to get this stuck to one rigid view. I don't want to do that. I think the day I do that, then there what can I offer to anybody? Right? What can I offer? If one day I wake up, I'm like, you know what, Mike Radzicki's right about everything. Here's the three papers he gave to me, and I'll put screenshots of them every time I tweet something. Oh, this is what Mike says, and this is the way it is, and hey, see you later, right? The day that happens, I'm already dead as a human being, right? So I just feel like I'm at a stage where I'm going to accept, Austrians coming into my talking circle, right? I want to hear why they believe in the things they believe in. I want to hear why neoclassicals are passionate about their science of economics. I want to understand why.
Yeah.
And I want to integrate that into my own line of thinking so I can make rational choices for myself. And I'm not talking about rational expectations or any of that. I'm just talking about making rational statements, created by myself by having multiple sources of information. Um, and that's going to be reflected on this show, even though it's a Steve Keen show. Like I can't see a situation where that's not healthy to have all viewpoints come in, even if like I don't really agree with Austrian economics all that much, but I need to take some of that in so I understand their perspective because I could be missing something because I've become so rigid in another school of thought that I'm missing the point.
Mm.
It's just I'm kind of rambling, but right, that's kind of my thought right now. Is I'm going to be a little more open going forward, right? And I'm fortunate, and Mike's fortunate, and Steve Keen is fortunate that we're pretty adept at math for the most part. The software tools do most of the work for me, but we can take these ideas, these mental models. Austrian economics seems to be one big mental model, let's say, and kind of, make, model part of it, right? Model a sliver of it using system dynamics and see what happens. And maybe find out some things we didn't even see with Austrian economics before, or maybe we find out, hey, well, this is what's wrong, or maybe. And then, I was watching something the other day. 90% of economics we agree on everything. All the schools. If you really look at it holistically, we probably agree about 90% of everything. It's only the divisive little slivers that that get highlighted in academic papers or highlighted in social media or wherever. Those parts get highlighted and it looks like there's this big gulf divide. But when I look at, as a Steve Keener, I'm trying to really learn all of neoclassical economics, all of Austrian economics. And as the more I put it all together globally, the more I realize the differences aren't that big. They appear big because the parts we disagree on get amplified so much, right? And it's so heated by ideology. But I truly believe economics, the 250 years of macroeconomics, or since Smith, let's say since Adam Smith, that collective knowledge, we all fit into one part of it, and 90% of it we agree on. There is 10%, and that 10% can be very important. I'm not discounting that the sliver is not very important. I'm just saying that I'm moving into a spot where I'm going to be open to all of it because I agree with a lot of it. What's your thoughts, Mike?
So one of the places, well, let me back up. So one of the things I've been trying to do over my career is bring system dynamics to economics in a way that will be acceptable to both system dynamicists and professionally trained economists. Forster always believed economists hate system dynamics until I came along and I said, Jay, some economists hate system dynamicists. We're organized into schools of thought. You got to go talk to the right economists. And they are institutional economists, post-Keynesian economists, more recently ecological economists, some development economists, maybe some behavioral economists. But let's just go to institutional and post-Keynesian because that's kind of the most familiar to us, and Steve kind of sits in those camps. So I've been doing that and fairly successfully, convincing heterodox economists, institutionalists, and post-Keynesians to consider at least system dynamics as legitimate. They might not drop what they're doing and use it themselves, but they won't object to it. But then they start doing a deeper dive. And now these are economists who are open to it. They're not just blowing it off or saying it's not legitimate. They're saying, I hear what you're saying. Okay. We in institutional economics talk about circular and cumulative causation. In system dynamics, you guys are talking about stocks and flows and feedback loops. So, okay, there's some common ground. In post-Keynesian economics these days, we're talking about stock flow consistent models. You guys do stock flow. Okay. So we were kind of on the same page. But then they'll say things like that. Keynes talked at length about the importance in macroeconomics of risk versus fundamental uncertainty. When you have risk, you can attach a probability to something that's going to happen in the future, like an actuary would. But a lot of economic decisions have to be made in the face of fundamental uncertainty. How do you incorporate fundamental uncertainty into your system dynamics models, Mike? I get that one a lot. Or technically, they're non-ergodic systems. Another one that comes up is Marx and Schumpeter.
What was ergodic again? What was ergodic? What was ergodic again?
Ergodic is the probability distributions going forward are always the same. And non-ergodic, that's not true. You get fundamental uncertainty. The other one I get a lot is, so heterodox economists are people like Schumpeter, Veblen, Marx, Galbraith, Gunnar Myrdal, and they're sort of evolutionary economists. In fact, institutional economics often refer to themselves as evolutionary economists. They'll say, do system dynamics models evolve? Are they really evolutionary? They're dynamic, but there's Newtonian dynamics, which is change within a given structure. And then there's Darwinian dynamics, which is evolutionary, which is structure causes behavior, but behavior causes a change in the system's structure, a mutation or something like that. And if your models can't evolve along those definitions, is it really a heterodox tool? Now there's some, I don't want to go too deep into this at this moment anyway, but that's the kind of pushback you get even from economists, heterodox economists who are open to hearing about system dynamics. But when they dig a little deeper and push a little bit, this is the kind of questions you get.
Wow. I'm so impressed with that.
That's actually a good, really philosophical question in itself, because if you start asking those questions, then you're really asking, is the universe deterministic, as system dynamics are, or is it non-deterministic, right? So if our universe is deterministic, then system dynamics does evolve, right? You see emergent properties as the system states change. It's still a deterministic model from the start, right? So that's a philosophical question in itself. Yes, system dynamics evolves in the sense that if our universe is truly deterministic to some degree, and there's in physics that is a huge debate. If that's the case, if our universe is deterministic and our system dynamic models are deterministics, the change in those models we classify as evolution. In physical reality, we could classify it as yes, system dynamics of models evolve too. However, if the universe is non-deterministic, then the question of our system dynamic models evolving, you could have an argument against that. No, they're not, because they are determined by initial conditions. That's interesting stuff in itself. What do you think, Dan?
Sorry, go ahead, Dan. Yes.
As a thinker, to delve into the determinism versus basically relativism is interesting. It's a real, you get sucked down that all the time. When I was listening to Mike and why I was applauding is actually on a completely different, but probably somewhat related takeaway. And that was that
I was like 3 minutes late on matching the applause. Sorry.
Yeah. So basically, there's this word called consilience, and this is the hope was bringing together the sciences with the arts, right? Okay, and so this is trying to make it said there's a bias in it, I think, about trying to make the arts more scientific, and I think even today we see a bias of the arts trying to be more scientific. Now, I won't get into that, but what I was trying to get into is a tighter bound definition of what evolution is. And so, Mike and I had this sort of like, probably like, it took a whole hour for us to then talk about what Mike was referring to, which was cultural evolution, right? And so the point on which it pivots in a biological evolution has to do with the reproduction of the species. The point at which it pivots and it kind of comes back and influences itself, the way Mike explained in the definition of something that evolves within the theories of economics, this is not something that relies on the birth death sort of thing, right? I mean, for the most part, right? You could study like population dynamics and say it's highly but that's a separate conversation, right? What Mike offered was a really tight definition of evolving that included a cultural component to it, and I thought that was very cool.
So it just, if I can push it a little farther. So when I have brought these responses from heterodox economists to the system dynamics people, senior people, and said, well, here's what my economist colleagues are saying. Here's what here's the responses I got. One was to say, well, if the definition of an evolving system, a system that can exhibit evolutionary behavior, is one in which structure causes behavior, but behavior can feed back and alter structure, then system dynamics models are not evolutionary. Because we build models where structure causes behavior, but behavior doesn't feed back to change. It doesn't rewrite equations. But George Richardson, a famous system dynamicist, told me, he said, well, but we have shifting feedback loop dominance in nonlinear systems where the active structure of the system can change. So in that sense, you could argue it's evolutionary. So that's one response that we got. Another one is a dynamic system, a system dynamics-ish technique that does have structure causes behavior and behavior can feedback and alter structure is agent-based modeling. And you can make agent-based models do that sort of behavior. When we say deterministic models in system dynamics, we typically mean models with no noise added to them. But we commonly add noise to system dynamics models. But when you do that, they are ergodic. They're not non-ergodic. So they fail the definition of sort of fundamental uncertainty in that respect. So that, would kind of go into the negative column. But what did Jay Forrester say when I ran this by him a couple of times? He paused and he thought, and he goes, well, does any of that stuff matter for understanding the economy? And he said, why are you worried about it?
Yeah, exactly. Now, would a neoclassical say, hey, you guys are great, you got all these tools, but it's not really needed to understand the fundamental that we use to determine to tell the story of the economy? And you're saying, but you're missing it. There's some things that really have to be included that you're not including.
I think Jay was another way of, he's not here, but if I were to try and, parse what he was saying or dig into what he was saying, is he goes, circle back. We're trying to take your mental model or a collective mental model, make it explicit and see its implications. And so if you have some sort of evolutionary thing that happens, a mutation, a ceremonial versus technological struggle, and one side wins, and that's part of your mental model, you could model that, and the model will do that. And you want to look at the implications, but it's not going to invent the light bulb on its own. As the model unfolds, suddenly it discovers something, right? If you haven't written the equations that are part of your mental model, that might be inactive, as George Richardson would say, but if they're not in there, it's not going to write its own equations and discover, cold fusion or something like that.
Yes, the philosopher me wants to bite, because I could grab that one and, it would be an hour
bite.
long.
No, bite. Let's go for it. Biting is good on these shows. Bite.
Biting is good.
Not like not physically bite. That'll bring a criminal charge, but like metaphorically.
All right, let me frame this correctly. There's only one way to do it. I've got a problem, Mike. And too long of a pause is like, anyways. So
Go ahead.
I've got a problem, right? I got a problem. And the problem is I want to, with system dynamics, map the human mind. And I told Ty about this. He's like, good luck. And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay. There's a lot of framework of studying the human mind that I think we can get off to a really good start with a system dynamics model. And how I would like to approach it is immediately integrate time, right? And you think to yourself, and because it's an agent-based concept right from the beginning, right from the ground up. What is the minimum amount of time to form an image in your mind, right? And so you understand there would be a whole discipline of neuroscience behind that kind of, so there's implicit bias in there, but I'm not really going to like a deterministic side. It's not, it actually just has to do with the cadence and the flow of thought, right? You can only think in a particular speed, right? Okay. And then so the mind would have a certain amount of computational power, which we already know that can go in as something going into this complex modeling of the human mind. Okay. So anyways, long story short, a lot of all the current neuroscience can be put into this model, but then it comes down to the point of, okay, well, how do we start to map out subjective thought? That's where Plato's theory of forms come in. Now, I'm not going to go into I need to get, Ty, and I need to get Mike to comment on it so far, but I think it's very attainable to take the model up to that point, right? Up to the point where we're like, okay, now let's add the subjective piece into that. Okay, so what are your guys' thoughts about modeling the human mind with system dynamics?
Well, I can take a crack at it. It's without really really looking in depth at what you're trying to say. Modeling, I would use system dynamics to look at an individual or a small group of individuals and model their behavior based on stimuli. I wouldn't use it to be modeling neurons per se. So I could maybe model, what's the point a person reacts to stimuli with subjective behavior, whatever that definition of subjective behavior is. I could do that. And I wouldn't, if I was a neurologist, I wouldn't be using system dynamics as a tool in any way. If I'm studying the way a human being behaves under certain conditions, their dynamic behavior, I would use system dynamics. But in that case, I wouldn't be modeling the brain per se,
Mhm.
right? I'd be modeling behaviors from stimuli. So
Now the gap in that as like a fellow colleague, and I want Mike to weigh in right after this, but if I'm an academic and we're all sitting around the cafeteria, I'm going to say that's fine. But you're actually presupposing your research and the move you've made into a behaviorist paradigm, right? And so you're which is largely discredited, right? I mean, it's the description of human thought and activity and behavior as something that is just a purely inductive behavioristic reward punishment sort of scenario is just incomplete. That's all I'm saying. And then it would be, now back to Mike, what are your thoughts on it?
I guess mine are similar to Ty's, that if somebody said, let's model the human mind, the human brain physiologically, where there's neurons and so forth, you could probably technically do it with system dynamics. Every stock is a neuron or something, but it would become quickly very clunky to represent that. And probably an agent-based tool would be better suited for that particular, project way, representation of the mind. If you wanted to say, I want to represent our understanding of what goes on in somebody's mind. Like there's a system dynamics model of Freud's id, and it was articulated carefully, and then based on that description, you could build the system dynamics model. I myself worked with an ROTC student, and we built a system dynamics model of leader-subordinate interactions. And we used the U.S. Army's physical fitness test as the performance measurement. And if I may, real quickly, it's really a rather cool model. What happens is there is a subordinate sector. This would be a recruit getting off the bus. And on the first day, they have the recruit do the physical fitness test. And you can max out at a score of 600. Let's say they score 350 on the first day. Okay. So that's their initial condition for the test, for their performance measurement. And then there is a physical sector to the subordinate, or subsector to the subordinate sector. So they have the number of hours they sleep per week, the number of hours they train per week, and their energy level. And of course, the more they train, the more their energy goes away. The more they sleep, the more their energy goes up. And different people have different physical constitutions. Some people need more sleep. Some people recover more quickly from a workout and whatever. So you can, again, in principle, set you get the person's score on the first day, and then their characteristics of train. Are they a workout hound, or they're a couch potato? Do they sleep a lot or not? What's their energy recovery and depletion? And so forth, right? And then there's the psychological subsector for the subordinate. And are they intrinsically motivated by a leader and or extrinsically motivated, right? So if they see themselves improving on the physical fitness test, that gives them more motivation. So motivation is a stock. And or the leader is praising or criticizing them. And do they respond to that? And if they do, how do they respond to praise, and how do they respond to criticism? If you yell at me, I'll just run slower. Versus if you yell at me, I'm like, holy crap, and I'll try harder. So we have it. You can set the subordinate up any way you want. Then you have the leader. And the leader's goal for you, for the subordinate, I should say, on day one, when you get off the bus, is whatever your score is. So the model starts in equilibrium, that evil term equilibrium, right?
Yeah.
And then the leader is either starts out as a praiser or a criticizer. Doesn't matter which, pick one. You're either a pat him on the back guy or a kick him in the butt guy. And then you can say they're adaptive or not, meaning as they either praise or criticize, they're watching the performance on this physical fitness test because they're tested every couple of weeks, this ROTC officer candidates. And if they see their praise or their criticism, whatever they started with, isn't working, if they're non-adaptive, it's my way or the highway, they just double down on it. And if they're adaptive, they start saying, as this isn't working, I'm going to start going the other way. I'm going to ease up on the criticism, and then I'm going to start praising and see if that starts working. So you can set the model up any way you want. And then we put in a game score. So yes, you want to get the recruit to 600 on the test. That's the task. That's the leader's job. But how did they get there? Did they go and finally get there, or did they go up there and stay? Mm-hmm. Right. So we measured their route to get there, and you punished it if it's if it's not a direct route. Mm-hmm. But also, they're at a 600 score at the end of the training period. It's 48. It's 4 years of training. Is their motivation gone and their energy level? They can barely pull themselves up out of bed in the morning. So they're at 600. They have no motivation, no energy. Or maybe they're at a 550, but they're gung-ho, highly motivated. So that's reflected in the scoring metric that we put in. And what I realized, so it has the physical as well as the psychological stuff all intertwined. It's not really mapping the human mind. But it's very interesting. And I judge an interesting model this way. When I would set it up to run this way or that way, I didn't know before I pressed the go button what was going to happen, even though I built the model. Because there were so many different things going on there. I was often very surprised at the result. It was very hard to predict. So that tells me now we need the computer. Because if you could always predict it, well, you don't need to build a computer model, right? Then to complete the story, we ended up making it into a game and having 54 ROTC students play it and try and get the best score they could. And we ran a test to see if they knew the subordinate's profile, or if they didn't, did it matter? Mm-hmm. And in the sample, the cadets who knew the subordinate's profile, they respond to intrinsic motivation. They respond to extrinsic. They have a high energy level, whatever it is. Those people scored better than the leaders who didn't know and had to kind of adapt and grope and try and figure out. But it was not statistically significantly different. So we couldn't say anything about the population. But either way, the implications are quite important, right? For the U.S. Army. If we found a statistically significant difference, it suggests that every leader, every drill instructor, whatever, should get a binder with each cadet's profile on it and treat them accordingly. Pick this one in the pants, pat this one on the back. If there was no statistical difference, which there wasn't, it says it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the issue I want to get this word that you put in my head. So when the statistical significance continues in a pattern, right? It's called a what? Well, the probability stays.
And it's not. It's ergodic. If the
ergodic,
probability distributions are the same over time. Yes.
Yeah. So the problem, here's where an impregnated philosophical approach from the ancient Greeks makes so much sense even still today, and it's a pragmatic of sorts. It's pragmatic, but it's still moving towards a perfected ideal of goodness, right? So I understand you take the arm's distance away as an economist and an academic, but I say that from day one, you need to be able to put the ethics in it because it is so important to how the human experience is, right? And so the way you and Ty are describing these kinds of experiments feel very much like a guy in a lab coat and going down the Skinnerian sort of like, oh, if we do this, the rat will turn down this approach, right? And so I think that it's very dangerous to do that because it depends how, it's a very inductive method of collecting data, and over time you're saying, yeah, we got a high probability of whatever, and so you start to implement that. Something exogenous from the system changes it. And if you were to retest it there, you'd have different results. And so you start to get academics that start to fall in love with their own models because they didn't actually go down to a first principle that is more rooted in human behavior and has a common sort of teleology to it. You say, whoa, teleology, we don't want to do this. We're academics. That's an anathema. But moving something towards that greater good is actually, I think, something that's essential.
Welcome, Helkin Artigi. I don't know if I'm saying that name wrong. Yeah, you got a good insight there. Human behavior cannot.
Ty, you went quiet. Is Ty, you're not talking.
His lips are moving, but we can't hear him.
Well, Ty is having a wonderful time there, so we're going to guess what he's talking about. He's just, he doesn't even know we're talking. Let's just start waving our hands and maybe he's going to hear us. I don't know. Ty, you're muted. Oh, that's it.
Oh.
Okay, so let's read this. Oh, and he took the damn thing down.
So I think,
you get my point, Mike? Do you get my point? Like, I mean, you almost wonder who lets Dan on this bloody show, but it's like, I'm saying there's room for improvement at a first principle standpoint. So is your approach too Skinnerian?
Well, let me answer it this way. I described what we did, and I worked with the student was a psychology student. We also had 2 psychology professors involved, and I built the model. I moved the mouse and wrote the equations, but they were telling me the relationships with intrinsic motivation, extra, all that stuff from the literature, meaning however psychologists, do lab experiments or whatever, they're saying that these relationships exist in the literature. And then if a person had this particular set of characteristics, both physical and psychological, and the leader acted a certain way, here's what would happen.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's a legitimate way to uncover human behavior or everybody's unique, and so you cannot sort of generalize, find any patterns or what have you. Now we're into the philosophy of science of psychology, I guess, or human behavior or something like that.
No, you're stuck at, you can go and stare at that abyss of relativism, but we don't need to go there. I want to compliment you on the fact that there is a body of literature and a vast amount of resources in the psychology profession and throughout academia to help and aid that model. There's lots of, I don't know if you'd call them variables, but there's lots of value that you're bringing into that. It's not a determiner. It's like, I think we were talking earlier on in the show. It's like we all agree what to put in the model, and now let's that's why, I mean, we didn't really go here, but you almost wonder, it could be a tool. I imagine that as a tool of, let's put what's important to us normatively into a model, find a way to measure it, and then predetermine how we're going to react and spend against it. Because, it's like, you'd almost be able to say, let's get a political plan in place. Here are all the variables. Here are all the things that could go wrong. Because we don't, even Steve says, right? And you're the same way. I know you're going to agree. We are very poor at understanding or predicting exponential behavior.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
so
humans are bad at, they think things grow linearly, not exponentially.
Oh, not exponential behavior, understanding exponentials. Right. Exactly. Right. So you'd be in agreement with that. And that is, I think, a really important, I mean, like personal finance 101, like, you need to save for retirement, like people don't do it,
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's psychology and behavioral economics, present bias and what have you. Yeah. So I just a point to emphasize on modeling. And again, it's sort of a philosophical thing, I guess. When we do system dynamics modeling, we're not trying to produce a digital twin of the real system. Here's the real world is over here. And we're making an exact replica of it, but just on the computer. We don't think that's possible. We instead of modeling a system, we model a problem from a system's perspective. And then the issue becomes, okay, we're gonna leave a lot of stuff that's in the real system out of our model. What are we going to leave out and what are we going to let in? And you mentioned just a moment ago what's important to us and what have you. That's the conversation. What is important? What should be inside the fence, inside of our model to address a particular problem, right? And then if the concept should be in there, how can we define what it is? If it's inventory of widgets, it's pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. If it's morale, it's a little more difficult to, with soft variables and what have you, or national identity. How do you, and if you can't define it, then you have to go back and say, well, come back when you've got a precise definition and we can put it into the model, right? So therein lies, it forces you to be precise about, well, what do you mean? It's inside of here. Well, more precisely, what do you mean?
Well, okay, so follow me with this on a climate model from not a very big, complicated model. You say step one. What's your first principle, the first layer of programming you're going to put in? I'm going to put in the Dan climate model, okay? And so this would be the control. This is the point that how many calories does an individual need to live, a human need to live, okay? This is the I value human life model.
Okay.
So for men, it's 1,500 calories, and for women, it's 1,200 calories. Okay. All right. Now, if this becomes almost like a right, you can start to put in the model and say, hey, wait a minute, there's actually a mathematical way to model the total population in the world. And if this is a human value that we value in terms of human life, then there's a quick and rapid end to human hunger. Is that a fair?
You could certainly model like a famine or something, like here's the number of females and males we have, their caloric requirements, at least on average. Here's the foods available, or here's what we grow or import, whatever. They provide so many calories. You got demand, you got supply. Are they allowed to interact, or do you export the food and let your people starve? Didn't Mao do that? I think. Back in the 70s, whatever, exported the food and let his people. So, I mean, you get into all of that, but yes, you could precisely model all those concepts. Absolutely.
I mean, you did this on a supply and demand thing. Now, isn't this kind of like how valuable is a supply and demand curve within your work?
So I don't know if literally a Marshallian demand curve or whatever, but Marshall said supply and demand work like blades of a scissor, and they got to work together, right? It's just how I think. I'm a system dynamics guy, but I'm an economist first, and I think supply and demand, when I'm addressing a problem, at least at first pass, those two ideas pop into my head and say, can I do anything with supply and demand, as well as stocks and flows and feedback loops and what have you? I can give you another example, which is kind of neat. There was a guy, he's passed away now, very smart guy, a little bit out there on the distribution scale of interesting folk. Mm-hmm. But he would come to the System Dynamics conference every year. I think by training he was an engineer, and he would do system dynamics models of mystic experiences. And he would get up there and present this elaborate model with stocks and flows and feedback loops and run simulations, and everybody would be like, oh, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Cool. He was very sincere. Technically, his models were, all dimensionally correct and whatever. But yeah, he was the only guy who would, but he had thought about all the concepts and precisely defined them in his model, and then showed us the implications. So stuff like that can be done, but you've got to be precise in your definitions.
Yeah, and I think that's the inspiration that I hope to come out of this channel, for people to maybe pick up the Minsky software or another software. I'm going to advocate for Minsky because I can see, the extent of what kind of models Ty has built. So, and they're just impressive. I'm not going to lie. I have in my background, it's one of those projects I'd like to do with the human mind. I think that there's a whole, I guess, like, literature based on like information philosophy, like the flow of information. And I think that these types of things would really, like, I can imagine a lot with my my brain, but it's nice I think it would be nice to have a system dynamics model that actually takes into account the information flow and the processing power of the human brain, I think that would be very interesting. And I think there could be a lot done with that.
There are some people who use a software package called AnyLogic, which allows people to build multi-method dynamic simulation models. In other words, a simulation model could have an agent-based component, a system dynamics component, and a discrete event component, all interacting in the same file, in the same model. Each of those techniques representing, where appropriate, their way
Really? That's cool.
of capturing something. So some people have been experimenting with having a bunch of agents, but inside of each of the little simulated agents head is a system dynamics model of the real system. And what does that mean? Yeah, so
impressive.
It's starting to get very complicated. Yeah.
And what software is that?
AnyLogic.
And can you put a Minsky model in that?
When you say put a Minsky model in it, the Minsky model would be the system dynamics component. So if Minsky can be translated into VenSim, I think AnyLogic can probably suck in a VenSim model and directly and put it in there. Otherwise, you'd have to recode it, and then you can go from there. See? So
wow, that's really interesting, really complex. I've often thought that as the discipline gets more complex, it gets further and further from the average layman to be able to form some sort of heuristical understanding or recall ability, right? And I know that may be long outside of, or far outside of the academics scope of work, but it's not outside of mine, right? I think that we're querents. I mean, we like to ask questions. We're novelty seekers. And so I think the answer lies in a more efficient system for the post-Keynesian complainers, basically.
I can tell you one of the cutting edge things that's happening right now in system dynamics, the AnyLogic people are doing it, whatever, is trying to figure out how can we use ChatGPT and other AI tools to build better dynamic simulation models. So the role of artificial intelligence in all this stuff, when you say mapping the human mind or whatever, is probably ultimately where all this stuff is headed. And I can't even begin to predict what's going to happen. But I have been playing with ChatGPT, and it's quite amazing. And so if anybody hasn't done that yet, you should open an account. It's free, and goof around a little bit, watch a few YouTube how to do its videos, and it's pretty outstanding.
And here I have to give a plug for planksip. You're going to see more ChatGPT inspired content. I've been very bearish. It's kind of like I have to think about my left and my right. I mean, I don't, but some people have that problem. They have to think about which is, mine's like former and latter. I have to think former, yeah, right? I have to organize it in my head before I speak it. So in this situation, I embrace it wholeheartedly and don't fall into this ridiculous trap of it's going to take over the world BS. It's the people that can use it, will use it. And will there be bad outcomes? Yes. Will there be good outcomes? Yes, there will be. And I just encourage people to do it for good outcomes. And we're at planksip, we're trying to take, I'm trying to encourage people to write more with, show your work. I mean, this would be a familiar teacher sort of thing. Show your work. You use ChatGPT, just show it. What did I ask? The questions you ask, what your prompts are important. Right. And people can learn from that. And so be transparent, show how you're using it, show how you're engaging with it. Have fun with it. It took me 16 attempts just to get this, stupid machine to answer something.
The prompts are super important. If you have
exactly right,
you'll get crummy results. But if you have good prompts and you give it feedback, it gets up better and better. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've thought from a macro standpoint, I think that these large language learning models, right? Okay. They are a really good reflection of our culture. And and you can see where the technology will be going into like a real-time feedback loop, right? Of what, so agree what to extract from these large learning models. And this can be a framework of a liberal polemic, really. It's like, okay, we have this, let's use this as a benchmark to understand. I mean, things like sentiment analysis is kind of like
Daniel.
Yeah.
Daniel.
Yeah.
Daniel. Listen, I'm having so many technical issues right now. Just because I unplugged my headphones. It's more of a video card issue for some reason. We're gonna end the show.
Oh man.
It's been 2 hours.
Rolling.
Hold on. Let's see if I can bring myself back on. I'm getting a huge delay. I can't really. I just don't want to look at myself. Can you see me talking? For me, like I have like a 30-second delay on my video that I see of myself. I can see you guys in real time. Right? I got to turn it off because it bogs down my whole computer. There. See, now I'm back in business, right? What's happening in the chat? Hey chatters, do you want us to end the show or do we keep going? They'll decide it right at this point.
Okay, yeah. No, that's a good thing. Poor Mike might have to go babysit some grandchildren though.
I'm in the middle of digging an electrical trench in my yard for my new barn. It's rather dirty and exhausting work. When I stop here, that's what I'm going to do. I got to pick up the pickaxe again and finish digging that thing.
So he's secretly saying, he's like, come on, please keep talking. Please keep talking.
Right? I know, right?
Yeah. No, but yeah. Mike, do you have, do you use a shovel and a pick? Like you're doing it manually?
Yeah.
And a wheelbarrow?
I have a Polaris Ranger side-by-side. I throw everything in.
Oh, there, you cheater. I knew you cheated at some point. Like nothing.
I'm 65 years old, man. My back isn't like it used to be.
Yeah.
I'm looking at all the, you got chatters here. Oh, I was enjoying the chat, and we got Bob here. We need overtime, and I saw you guys. I got you guys on the big screen while I was trying to restart my computer, and you guys looked like you were going to town with a really good conversation, and I was really pissed off. I'm really pissed off right now. Yeah,
you're gonna have to.
You know what? This is the perfect time for the F-bomb. I'm fucking angry right now. I'm frustrated with the technology. I'm disappointed. I feel left out.
Yeah.
Right. I probably should maybe seek out a clinical counselor so I know how to release this anger in a healthy manner.
Or an IT specialist.
Or an IT specialist. Or just a good case of beer because it's Saturday and it's it's a little bit cooler today, so I can go out on my back deck and drink some cold Guinnesses.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Are you off the alcohol, Mike? Or do you drink beer every once in a while?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
From Wisconsin, so say no more.
Yeah. They're all alcoholics in Wisconsin.
Well, we like our beer and our cheese.
Now, look, I'm going to throw out something I don't have the authority to throw out, but because it's really ultimately up to Ty. But I like this comment from Michael D'Souza way back. I had to just hunt for it. Now, he says your compass in the journey through multiple worldviews is your own values. Know your values, write them down, and frame every question, every inquiry to your values, not their values. And, that's the point that I was trying to make, is that this could be an incredibly democratic tool to say, look, what is the responsibility of the government? What is the model that reflects, the main issues at hand? What can affect those? And what contingencies do we have in place to mediate those? And what are we prepared to, as a democratic nation, to do if certain things happen, right? And so it's not like it's like I think we're ready for that, right? Anyway, so the reason why I bring that up is that you can actually put like, what are the things that are important to you? And this is kind of I vote for this model. I vote for this model. I vote for this model. You imagine politics like that. So anyways, I think that would be quite fascinating. The thing I'd like to be able to do is to invite this fellow onto the show. And that's why I warned, because I don't have the authority to do that. I mean, really, Ty's got to really be the one to, to do that. He's the one putting all the hard work into it. But this Michael D'Souza Cruz, if he's interested in coming on the show, I want to connect him and Ty, and I think he'd be an interesting person to have on the show. That's my
Michael and I communicate off the show, right? I gave him, what books did I give him? I gave him Industrial Dynamics. I gave him World Dynamics. What else did I give him? Gave him The Limits to Growth. He was really into what is system dynamics, and so those are kind of the Bibles. And Business Dynamics by John Sturman. I think if you want to look at like macro or microeconomics and system dynamics, that's a pretty big Bible right there. I do want to order a book by that Mike has actually edited. What's it called? Feedback Dynamics.
Guys, we're torturing Michael here. He stepped out to go use the bathroom or go and go pick up something from the grocery store or something, and now he knows we're talking about him, and he wants to know what's up. Ty, do you think we can invite him on?
If Michael wants to come on the show, he's going to have to like visually be on a web camera, and he has to not be shy, but he's more than welcome to appear on a future episode if he so desires.
You brought the poor thing to tears, the guy. He's come back from his bathroom break, and he's ecstatic, I think, right? Or he thinks that we're ridiculous to have him on the show.
Michael D'Souza Cruz, we've run out of ideas of guests on who should come on the show, and
don't sell it to him, Ty. Sell it to him.
I don't. You know that. Dan, I'm not a salesperson. I'm more of a blunt, up front type of person. I was thinking. We'll get. You know what, Michael? I'll email you, and maybe we'll set up a date that works for you, and we'll get you on the show. And the format. You're here almost every week. We'll just talk about whatever you want to talk about. So we'll make that happen. Same with any other guest. If you want to be on the Steve and Friends show, this show is about you guys, the viewers that come every week. Ghost on the Half Shell, she has a very cool YouTube channel where she's does short little videos on current events. You can check her out too.
Oh, wow.
But that that extends to anybody. If you've got the courage to come on the show and be with me for 2 hours, shit. Damn, that's courage.
We're a pretty friendly lot.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Come on
right.
Down.
Well, I think we're good, and Mike's been itching at trying to want to go out and dig a ditch. So hack away, my friend. And I want to thank Ty for the opportunity to, talk a little bit more philosophy. I really have a love for it. It's not aggression. It's a passion. It's just I get a little excited about it sometimes.
Can we just cover the last topic? If you've noticed over the last few weeks, my Daniel's eyes drift to the side now. I didn't say anything about this for a few months because I thought, okay, maybe Dan's got a hidden disease, or maybe it's Tourette's,
neurological or something like that.
And so I didn't want to say anything. Lo and behold. Yeah. Okay. So lo and behold, it's actually AI.
My whole persona. I'm actually not real.
Yeah.
We're in the Matrix.
Like out of
metaverse.
So I'll explain. So I went and got my computer upgraded, and I got this video card, this NVIDIA video card, and it says the option is to get the eye tracking so that it looks at the camera. Well, it'll do that, but it'll have a little, that's the tell right there. It just yanks it back, right?
Yeah,
of course,
I feel like I'm in the Matrix watching you on screen. Like, there's some sort of like a glitch in the Matrix.
Yeah.
And I don't know what my reality is anymore.
Yeah.
Metaverse.
Yeah. Anyways, well, that's a wrap, guys. Daniel, thanks for being the guinea pig this week. Here, let me do it. Welcome back to Mike Redzicki. Glad you're back. We missed you. We're going to be back next week. We don't know who the guest is, but I'm sure it'll be interesting. Until then, see you next week. Bye-bye.
So you see that